What if your own father burned your inheritance in front of everyone? This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about finding buried truths, standing your ground, and turning ashes into legacy. When Marlin uncovers the real will his father tried to erase, everything changes. At my father's will reading, he lit my inheritance on fire literally, while the scent of melted wax clung to the carpet. Name's Marlin Rusk, 48 internal controller by trade. But that day I felt more like a ghost with a tie. Still had Zeke's brass key in my pocket untouched since the day he handed it to me. Ever had a moment so absurd you couldn't even get mad, just started digging? Tell me what's the strangest way someone ever tried to write you off. The flame didn't catch right away. It licked the edges of the envelope hesitant, then bloomed with a quiet hunger. The room didn't gasp. No one moved. It was the kind of silence that sat on shoulders heavy and polite. I kept my hands in my lap, fingers pressed to my knees so hard the fabric might have left an imprint. Morgan and Fields was too warm that afternoon. The firm's carpet was plush burgundy and smelled faintly of synthetic citrus. Outside the 8th floor window, the Missouri River cut wide and brown between banks lined with red-tipped maples. I thought about the water, its flow, its indifference. Honorary equity, the young clerk had said moments before. No vote, no shares, just a line in a ledger that said I mattered without the inconvenience of proof. Clifford didn't even look at me as he leaned forward and lit the envelope. His suit was gray, pressed sharp, the same color as his hair, which he wore slicked back like always. He grinned or something close to it, and the candle's reflection danced in his eyes. "Principle over profit," he said again, like it was a line from a sermon. Ben sat to his left, arms folded, lips a thin line. Her heels tapped the floor once every few seconds. She hadn't said a word since we arrived, and when the envelope began to curl and blacken, she didn't flinch. Lois Albright hadn't spoken either. My grandfather's former attorney. She stood near the corner of the room, hands clasped behind her back, posture so still it bordered on defiance. Her eyes kept drifting to me, narrowed sharp, as if trying to make out a smudge no one else could see. The paper burned fast. I watched the flames erase my name, the honorary title, the embossed logo. I smelled ink and cotton fiber, and maybe a little lemon oil from the finish on the desk. Clifford let the ashes drop into a glass bowl, then reached for a mint from the tray beside him. No one laughed, not even a cough. When it was done, the room shifted just slightly. Chairs creaked. The clerk cleared her throat. The wall clock ticked louder than necessary. I stood. "You done?" I asked. Clifford didn't answer. Ben did. "We all are," she said. I walked past Lois without looking, but her hand brushed mine, subtle, practiced, and I felt a fold of paper slide into my palm. I didn't look at it then, just the feel of it, a small, square handwritten. In the elevator, the walls mirrored my expression back to me, composed, maybe distant. But inside, something was shifting, tilting. My grandfather, Zeke Rusk, had always signed his name the same way, Z Rusk, with a small period after the Z. A detail. A signature. That copy. It didn't have the dot. When I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the breeze caught the smell of something toasted and old. I opened my hand and unfolded the note. "You remember more than they know." I returned to the office building I used to call home and couldn't find my name on the employee roster anymore. Wearbridge Freight's HQ hadn't changed in structure, still the same blocky glass design with brushed metal signage and impersonal landscaping, but something about the building had shrunk. Or maybe it was me. Leaves skittered under the loading docks, collecting in corners, like things forgotten and unclaimed. I scanned in at the side entrance, surprised the badge still beeped green. The receptionist offered a neutral smile but didn't use my name. I thanked her anyway, nodded as if I belonged. Maybe I still did. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt longer than I remembered. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like faint whispers that didn't care who overheard. The air smelled like toner and cold coffee, just as it always had, but the energy was wrong, like walking into a room where a conversation had just ended, and no one told you what it was about. A junior accountant one I vaguely recognized from years ago passed me in the hall and said, "Didn't know you were even still in town." He didn't stop walking. I smiled thinly, gave a polite nod. That comment stuck deeper than I expected. The HR suite sat in the same west-facing corner. Through the glass wall I saw a new assistant, young, tidy-hair navy cardigan tapping at her keyboard. She looked up when I knocked. "Can I help you?" she asked, standing halfway. "I'm Marlin Rusk. Just looking to retrieve something from the archives." She hesitated, clicked a few tabs. Her brow wrinkled. "I don't see your access credentials." I pointed to the far hallway. "Storage used to be right down there." She glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. "That room's the server bay now. It requisitioned it last year." I stood still for a beat, then forced a chuckle. "Is there a copy of the HR policies from 2016 to 2018? Her typing slowed. "Those were all digitized in the migration. We cleaned the physicals." "Cleaned," I repeated softly. She offered an apologetic shrug. "Was there something specific you needed? Just curious who approved my access revocation." She went still. "I'm not authorized to share that." I reached gently across the desk. "Try this search for Marlin Rusk, and access directive should be around 2 years back." After a pause, she leaned toward the screen and clicked into an old email chain. Her face changed subtly. She didn't speak, but she tilted the monitor slightly. Ben's name topped the email thread. "Per CEO directive, please remove Mr. Rusk from all control access. Effective immediately." The assistant swallowed. "Should I print this?" "No," I said. I just needed to see it. I stepped away, walking the halls without destination. I passed the break room, the printer closet, the wall where the company's first freight routes used to hang in thick wooden frames. All of it felt like a set someone else had staged. I found the janitor's cart parked near the mailroom. Inside a box labeled desk debris, I spotted it. My old brass nameplate. The corners were dented, and someone had scratched through the last 4 letters of my surname. I picked it up. It was heavier than it used to be. I slipped it into my coat pocket, and my hand brushed something else. Cold, small, familiar. The brass key. Zeke had given it to me the summer before he died, said, "You'll know when to use it." I never had. Until maybe now. Lois Albright didn't vote against me 3 years ago. She just walked out of the meeting. That silence said everything. Her home still smelled like old books and coffee grounds, like nothing had ever been discarded. Stacks of paper lined every flat surface, their corners curling like dry leaves. The heater clicked as it worked overtime against the damp chill of late November. I stood in her entryway holding the brass key in one hand and my breath in the other. "You're late," she said from her armchair, not looking up from the folder in her lap. "Traffic?" I lied. Rufus, the aging mutt with grizzled fur and tired eyes, lifted his head from a floor pillow and huffed once before sinking back down with a wheeze that was almost theatrical. Lois gestured to a seat with the corner of her hand. "You came for the will, I assume, among other things." She opened a cabinet beside her, pulling out a thin manila folder labeled Final Z Rusk Original. She handed it to me without ceremony. I set it beside the copy Clifford had waved around last month. "Dates match," she said, flipping both open. "But this..." She tapped Zeke's signature. "No period after the Z." She nodded. "And the angle see here, the way the R hooks. That's not Zeke's hand. I don't care how steady they claim his pulse was in the end." I exhaled. So it was altered, or rewritten entirely. Her voice was level, not accusing, just tired. And nobody questioned it because questioning a Rusk means you're out. We all learned that. I stared at the two documents, the same, yet not. Rufus snorted. Somewhere behind us, a kettle began to hiss. Lois stood slowly, her joints clicking. "Follow me." We walked through the narrow hallway past a wall lined with awards and faded photographs. One caught my eye. Her and Zeke, both smiling, both holding a small brass key. "My key. Or one just like it." She noticed me pause. "He gave me mine when he retired. Said it opened something worth saving." "In a box." "In a box," she echoed. We entered a cramped study where she pulled a lid off a box labeled Zeke Legacy. Inside were folders, notes, and one small envelope sealed in red wax. She passed it to me. The wax cracked under my thumb, and I unfolded the note. "If they erase you, find the iron box. The key will know where." I looked up. Lois was already watching me. "You still have it?" I nodded and opened my coat pocket. The key rested in my palm like it belonged there. "There's a storage unit," she said slowly. "South end of town. Zeke always paid cash. Said paper trails were for people who didn't know how to trust." "What's in it?" She gave a dry chuckle. "If I knew, I'd have dug it up already." We sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by memories stored in dust and caffeine stains. Rufus stood, sneezing quietly. Lois leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You ready to dig up what they buried?" I didn't speak, but I didn't look away either. That silence said everything. My debit card declined. The banker said, "Sorry, sir. This account is flagged. Deceased account holder." The words hung in the air longer than they should have, as if daring me to explain them away. I stood at the teller window, the breath leaving my lungs just a little faster than usual. The clerk looked past me, already reaching for the next form in the stack. "I'm standing right here," I said, voice steady. He glanced up briefly. "I understand, sir. But the system..." "Right, the system." I stepped back, pulled my coat tighter. Outside December had arrived like a held-breath fog crawling along the road's air sharp enough to sting. I walked to the parking lot, ignoring the phone buzzes in my pocket. One of them was Lois. I knew before I even looked. She picked me up 15 minutes later in her battered Ford, the same dog-eared map on her dashboard, and 2 coffee cups wedged between worn seats. "You okay?" she asked, eyes forward. "I'm legally dead." She nodded once. "Then let's go find the resurrection file." The storage facility sat on the edge of town, past the last traffic light where the pavement surrendered to gravel too easily. Evergreen lock and box. 7 rows of aluminum sheds all painted the same indifferent gray. Halogen lamps flickered overhead, humming like bees caught in jars. I approached unit number 7. The key felt colder than the air, and it stuck slightly in the lock before turning with a metallic click. The roll-up door groaned in protest, then revealed a box no larger than a nightstand safe. It didn't look like much. Inside a USB drive, an envelope marked Original, notarized will and a leather-bound journal. No gold, no confession letter, just 3 items that carried more weight than any vault ever could. I carried them back to the car in silence. Lois didn't ask. In the passenger seat, I opened the laptop and inserted the USB. The screen blinked once, then played. Zeke appeared thinner than I remembered him, his hair more silver than steel. He sat in what looked like his workshop, a desk lamp casting warm light against cool shadows. "If you're watching this," he said, "then they've already tried to erase you." I didn't blink. They'll call it a clerical error, a mismatch, a mistake in the system. Don't believe them. Behind him, shelves held tools, ledgers, and what looked like the edge of an old blueprint. They started with access, then name removal, then financial suspension. Next is legal status. You were never meant to survive the vote. They planned that. He leaned in. But your name, Marlin, is your compass. Don't let them steal your north. The video cut off. The screen stayed black. Lois watched without speaking. The only sound was Rufus snoring gently in the back seat. I opened the envelope next Zeke's real will. Dates matched, but the signature sharp. Complete. With the period after the Z. In the leather-bound journal were sketches, code names, snippets of meetings. Zeke had documented everything. Maybe not admissible in court, but enough to follow. I looked at Lois, her mouth tightened, eyes narrowing as if scanning headlines only she could read. I pulled out my phone. 2 words. "Let's begin." Devin Kell looked up from the signature scans and said, "This isn't just altered, it's digitally lifted. Rookie stuff." The words hit the wall behind me with more force than his tone suggested. Devin was never one for dramatics. His fingers moved lightly across the keyboard, eyes scanning pixel columns like a musician reading sheet music. "Look here," he said, zooming in. The curve on the R, it's too smooth. No pressure variance. That's not pen. That's pathing. I nodded slowly, not because I needed convincing, but because every click of Devin's mouse peeled away a layer of someone else's lie. Lois sat across the room, her hair clipped up, sleeves rolled, scribbling furiously on a legal pad. Around her, the once cozy craftsman home had transformed into a legal war room. Whiteboards lined the walls with timelines, family branches and asset transfers mapped like forensic arteries. Red twine crisscrossed a corkboard above the fireplace. Outside, snow slushed in dirty piles along the curb. Winter had overstayed its welcome. "Found something," I said, flipping through one of Zeke's old ledgers. "Look at this." Dad signed this entry for the Tilden account 2016. "See the little blot in the sea?" Lois leaned over, smudged slightly rightward. "Compare it to the same signature on the will copy," I said, handing over the printout. "Too clean. No blot." "Digital lift," Devin confirmed. If I had to guess, they scanned a dozen samples, composited one, and printed it clean. Lois turned to the laptop. That's enough for a civil challenge, but the press will hit harder and faster. You're thinking we go public? I asked. I'm saying we don't have a choice. I opened my contacts and found Lowell Tamber's number, an old acquaintance who now ran features for the Columbia Tribune. He'd burned me once with a misquote, but he owed me a favor. He answered on the third ring. Marlin, I've got a story, I said. A real one, and proof. I met him 2 hours later in the parking lot behind his office. Handed him a sealed envelope containing Zeke's will pension fund withdrawals that didn't align and a copy of the USB footage. He didn't smile. 3 sources. That's my condition. Then start with Devin Lois and the date on the will. He tapped the envelope twice. If this holds its front page. Back at Lois's place, the weight dragged like wet rope. We didn't talk much. Devin left, promising an affidavit. Lois made tea none of us drank. The next morning it hit. Dead on paper, the Rusk family's hidden rewrite. My name was on the byline quotes. My photo, too, taken without me noticing, probably from some LinkedIn headshot I'd forgotten existed. I held the paper in shaking hands, not from fear, but something more jagged relief sharpened by exposure. Lois tapped my shoulder. You're not invisible anymore. You're target number 1. I looked down at the article again, feeling the words burn through the ink. They'd come. I knew that now. Your Honor, my name is Marlin Rusk. I am very much alive. And I'm here to testify. My voice echoed off the marble and pine a beat louder than I intended. But the courtroom needed to hear it. I needed to hear it. Judge Kinley didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head slightly, razor-voiced reputation preceding her. You may proceed, Mr. Rusk, she said, tone clipped as a winter wind. The Boone County Courthouse was built like a fortress and felt colder than the day outside. Gray skies hovered over Columbia, and inside the chamber half the crowd wore coats despite the heat hissing quietly through old vents. The gallery brimmed with faces, retired employees, curious reporters, a few lawyers with pads perched like birds of prey. Clifford sat stiffly, his once impenetrable posture slumped under a coat 2 sizes too large. He looked smaller than I remembered. Ben sat 2 rows behind him, eyes darting anywhere but mine. Lois opened with precision. Your Honor, our case involves not just financial fraud, but the erasure of a living man's identity. She handed over the pension withdrawal logs, names that didn't match dates that shouldn't exist. Then came the forged will overlays. Devin testified calmly, using the courtroom projector to show pixel-level evidence. This portion of the R, see the unnatural smoothing, that's vector artifacting, not ink. The screen flickered slightly, causing a rustle in the crowd. And the signature Devin continued, does not match Mr. Rusk's documented style, nor Zeke Rusk's final verified documents. Then Lois cued the final piece. I call into evidence a recorded statement from Mr. Zeke Rusk, verified by timestamp, metadata, and digital hash integrity. The courtroom dimmed slightly. The video began. Zeke's face lit the screen. If you're watching this, then someone has rewritten my family's legacy. He paused. Then, this man tried to bury my granddaughter. Let this be her proof. A few in the courtroom stirred. Someone gasped. Even the court stenographer blinked out of rhythm. The video ended. I stood again. Not to plead, just to be seen. I'm not here for revenge. I said, only to reclaim my name and the work my grandfather meant to leave behind. Judge Kinley spoke without flourish. This court recognizes the legal identity of Marlon Z. Rusk and reinstates his standing under Missouri corporate and inheritance law. Forgery investigations will proceed. Adjourned. The gavel came down. Clifford looked up not at me, but toward the empty wall behind the judge. Then slowly, for the first time in decades, his gaze lowered. I turned to leave. Ben touched my sleeve. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said, voice barely audible. I didn't reply. But I didn't shake her off either. Outside, the clouds seemed heavier, as if unsure how to dissolve. The gavel's echo lingered like a final breath before silence. I inhaled slowly, catching the scent of old varnish and quiet dust Dad didn't show up to the settlement review. The chair at the head of the table stayed empty. It should have made things easier, but it didn't. Ivy's diner still had the same flickering sign above the door, the V always blinking. Inside, nothing much had changed. Booths, worn soft old jazz leaking from the wall speakers, and the walls cluttered with faded headlines and medals from wars long over. The kind of place time walks slower. I got there early and chose the corner booth. The chair wobbled. I smiled a little. It was the same one I'd sat in years ago when Zeke leaned across the table, lowered his voice, and said, "Power's not in the seat. It's in the hands that hold others up." Ben arrived 5 minutes late. Her coat swallowed her frame and her makeup looked heavier than usual, like armor. She didn't order anything, just sat down across from me and stared at the tabletop like it held the words she couldn't find. "I thought it was temporary," she said eventually. "Dad said you'd left for good. Said I should keep things running, not ask questions." I slid the manila folder across the table. The paper inside made a soft thud, a withdrawal of charges signed and sealed. She didn't touch it. Why, she asked. I gestured to the mug between us. Old ceramic hairline crack sealed with a strip of gold foil tape, the kind of fix Lois would have made. I turned it slightly so she could see. "Because this doesn't go back to perfect," I said, "but it doesn't have to break further." Ben looked at me, eyes rimmed in red. I didn't mean I know. The sugar bowl was missing a spoon. Our water glasses left faint circles on the table that would dry and disappear like most things eventually do. "I don't want the company the old way," I said. "I'll build something else, with people who remember what mattered." Miss Ivy refilled my coffee and gave me a soft look but said nothing. She'd seen enough families fall apart at that booth. Maybe she had her own ledger of who made it through and who didn't. We sat in silence until the bill came. I paid. Ben nodded rose and walked out with the folder still on the table. At home that evening, I took the brass key from my coat and hung it next to the door. Then I reached up and removed the CEO nameplate from the office wall. Power isn't in the seat. Zeke was right. They say Zeke's old warehouse had no windows. Now it glows like a lighthouse. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no speeches, just a steady stream of sunlight through the new skylights and the scent of fresh paint still clinging to the rafters. The plaque by the front door read, "Zeke Foundation. Honor moves forward." Gold letters against salvaged walnut. Lois said it was too poetic. I said it was just right. The dogwoods along Old Highway 63 had bloomed early, dotting the road like a celebration no one remembered to announce. trucks passed honking at intervals, but inside the old freight space, everything felt oddly still. Ellen stepped through the doorway, as if entering a memory she wasn't sure belonged to her. 62 shoulders slightly caved in from a life of standing tall too long. Her file folder was clutched so tightly I could see the corners bend in her grip. "You're sure they won't laugh me out the door?" she asked. I smiled. They'd have to get past Lois first. Lois didn't look up from her paperwork, but the corner of her mouth twitched. She had a form waiting already pen uncapped. I walked Ellen to the corner office, if you could call it that. A space with a workbench, a desk lamp, and a map of retraining workshops across the state. We sat together and went through her appeal. She stopped midway, eyes fixed on the edge of the paper. "I haven't felt useful in 5 years, she said. I pointed toward the back wall where an old office chair stood lopsided near the tool cabinet. "Start by fixing that," I said. Zeke hated a wobble. She laughed short, uncertain but real. The kind of laugh that tells you someone's remembering their own strength. As she walked toward the chair, I caught sight of someone outside the window. A man, maybe late 30s, leaned on the railing. His expression unreadable, but there was something in the way he stood, a familiarity in the tilt of his shoulders. "Your son?" I asked. Ellen nodded. "He drove me. Didn't say much on the way. Well, I said maybe he's letting the light do the talking." When Ellen left that day, the form was filed, the chair was fixed, and her son had stepped in to help rearrange some shelves. No speeches, no trumpets, just work. Lois locked the cabinet and handed me a box of keys, old ones from desks, drawers, locks we no longer used. "You want these melted down?" she asked. I held up one Zeke's brass key. It felt heavier now than it ever did in my coat pocket. "No," I said. I walked to the entrance, found a nail just above the door frame, and hung it there. "It doesn't unlock anything now. It just belongs." The radio crackled faintly in the background, soft jazz weaving through the scent of fresh paint and sawdust. Outside, the dogwoods trembled in the breeze, and inside the light kept moving forward. The light inside the warehouse was different by dusk, warmer, like it remembered something. That old brass key still hangs above the doorway, no longer unlocking anything, but reminding me of everything we almost lost. Sometimes justice isn't a courtroom gavel. It's a quiet chair repaired, a name restored, a woman finding purpose again. When life tries to erase you, you don't scream. You rebuild, piece by piece. Bridges don't burn only from fire. Some just rot in silence. And yet they can still be rebuilt with steadier hands. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments, or pass this along to someone who's finding their footing again.